Welcome to Unscripted and Unstoppable. I am Laureen Quick, your host, a navigator for women 50 and beyond, guiding you through the seasons of change, purpose, and possibility. As we weave through our lives, we start to notice, though, that there is something that we can't always prepare for. We're not ever prepared for, really, and that's that cycle of loss. We lose parents, siblings, friends, sometimes all within a few short years. And while our hearts expand with each memory, they can also grow heavy with the weight of so many goodbyes. And it isn't just the grief of our family and our friends, it's the grief of loss we experience at many different levels in our life. But I'm here to tell you that I think grief is really love. It's love with nowhere to go. It just kind of swirls around us. And for many of us, especially in this season of life, that grief can actually feel like it's just too much to carry. Today, though, we're going to be talking about how to hold it without being consumed by it. My guest is Gabrielle Elise Jimenez, a hospice and palliative care nurse, end of life doula, author, and grief educator. Gabby has spent years at the bedside of the dying, helping families navigate loss with tenderness and with truth. She's created something called a grief bowl that we'll talk about today. It's a simple, beautiful ritual that gives our sorrow a place to rest so that it doesn't have to live inside us alone. Together, we will explore how to make peace with loss, protect our own heart, and find ways to keep living, even when the people in our lives that we love are no longer here. Because grief does not mean your story is over, it just means that your love has changed form. Let's begin. Gabby, I want to start by just jumping right in and asking you the first question. And that is, you have spent years besides people at the end of their life. How has that shaped your understanding of grief?
Wow. So it's evolved over time. I have been working in end of life care for about 15 years. And it came upon that work sort of unexpectedly. It wasn't like a lifelong dream. It happened later in life. I was in my 40s. And before that time, I'd experienced a lot of loss, probably more than the average person, actually. And I don't think I ever dealt with it.
Mhm.
And working in end of life care has elevated the value of life for me. And while I'm at the bedside witnessing so many hundreds and hundreds of last breaths, probably over 2,000 at this point, what I also witness is that very last goodbye. And and it's heartbreaking. But it's affected me on multiple levels. For instance, both my parents died when I was in my 30s. I was there for both deaths, but I didn't know then what I know now. And so when I was at their death, I was stepped back a bit, sitting against the wall, sitting in a chair 10 or 15 feet away, watching everything unfold, the way my siblings reacted, the way their friends reacted. It was different. I just watched and I admittedly didn't feel anything because we didn't have a close relationship. And so I didn't feel that sadness that a child should feel when their parent dies. I was in my 20s, and maybe I was more of a selfish person at that time and only thinking about me. But when I sat at that bedside, I could only think about all the things we didn't have. Moving forward years later, working at the bedside and witnessing a daughter say goodbye to her mother or father takes me into a deep, dark place because I watched this sadness, of course, the difficulty in saying goodbye to someone you love, but witnessing them share about a relationship I knew nothing about. Not just because I didn't know them personally, but because I'd never experienced it. So just leaving those homes and those last breaths, feeling the daughter's reaction to saying goodbye to her mom or dad, I I went to that deep place and I was sad and envious and grief felt heavy. But I also witnessed so much love and a life well lived and so that sort of softens the grief. And then my brother died 3 years ago. And
Mhm.
my sister had died 10 before, but I wasn't there for that and I didn't know what I know now. When my brother died, I sat at his bedside, sort of playing tug of war with being his sister and being a hospice nurse, someone who knew a lot about death.
Mhm.
And I had to say goodbye to him after not speaking to him for 7 years. That was hard because now I'm thinking about time, how much time we waste. And I've witnessed grief all over. I mean, so much grief. But this time it was my grief. And this was new for me because I had never really dealt with my other losses. And so as he was taking his last breath, I went to this place of here I go again, only this time it's heavier because now when I watched him take his last breath, it was as though I was watching every other person in my life who had died that I didn't react to. So working in end of life care has taught me about the fragility of life,
Mhm.
the reality of death, questioning my own mortality all the time. I think what this has done, this work has done for me, and it always hasn't always been good or easy, but is to prepare me. And with my brother's death, I worked through that in such a way that it helped me to work through my other losses in a healthier way.
Mhm. Your story touches my heart. I have also lost both my parents, and also my husband died. And with my parents, I wasn't there for their deaths, but I did grieve. And there was a chaos of emotions around that whole experience. For my husband, I was fortunate enough to be by his side when he passed away. And it was weird because it's not like all the movies that you see, you know.
Yeah.
It's very different, and it's hard to kind of explain that. But it was it was very it left an impression upon me about death, and I think I mean, that's been my parents. My gosh, they've been dead for, I don't know, 30, 40 years. And now my husband has been dead for about 15. It does, it does touch you and it continues to touch you. It comes back up for you at different times. I was touched again by the story you just shared about your experience with death as you've matured through life, and that each death does bring back, I think, other old graves. Each loss brings back sometimes old graves. One of the things I know you've done is created this grief bowl ritual. Let's tell our listeners, those watching today, what does that look like in practice?
So it started during just before COVID. I took a class from a shaman and it was a grief workshop. And she gave us all this beautiful little black bowl. And she taught us to put some water in it and a little salt when we're grieving because the salt is known to absorb the grief.
Hmm.
So I used my bowl for that. Only at the time, I wasn't dealing with my own grief. I was helping others deal with theirs. So that's what I used it for. And I remember one of my first or second patients' family members gave me a little heart after her, I think it was her mother had died, and she gave me this heart. And I put the heart in my bowl on my shelf, which I call my shelf of special things. And I had my bowl there with my heart. And over time, people would gift me hearts, not knowing that I collect them. I didn't even think I was collecting them. It just sort of happened. And I would put them in the bowl. COVID came, and I, among with many other people on this planet, as nurses, were the only people that could sit next to the bedside of someone who's dying when their family couldn't be there. It was really hard. Of course, it was hard. I do believe we did that wrong. If I can wear PPE, their mother, father, sister, brother should be able to as well. I mean, we elevated grief to a level that is really unreachable at this time. And people didn't get to say goodbye. And so I was holding phones up to people who were dying so their family members at the very least could say goodbye over the phone, or I would take pictures of their hands and send it to them just so they knew I was holding their hand. And I would come home and it was just so heavy. And one day I came home and I walked by my shelf of special things and I looked at my bowl. And at this time, I might have had 10 little hearts in it. And I took the hearts out because I felt like I needed to touch something. I needed to feel, right? Like I didn't know how to do it on my own. I needed help. So I held these hearts in my hand and I sat down on my couch and I just held them and I touched them. And what I did was I took each one and I thought of the person who had died, the people who had died, the ones who I said goodbye to for their loved ones. And then I thought about all the people that didn't get to say goodbye. And I processed my COVID nurse grief doing that.
Hmm.
And it became a ritual for me. I would come home after a long day of five or so patients, switching out of my PPE every single time, coming out of their facility, taking it all down, seeing the creases in my face, knowing that someone just died again and someone had to say goodbye again. And I was feeling hardened by this work. And I would come home exhausted and I would hold my hearts in my hand and hope that they somehow got my message. Well, this evolved over time and it became something I counted on. And now this is my bowl of hearts. It's overflowing because either I've told the story and someone has said, "Oh, I'm going to add a heart to your bowl." And now it's almost too heavy to carry. So I've sort of changed the ritual a little bit in which I pour all the hearts on the table and I just pick up each one and I think about the person I cared for, the people who love them, my reaction. I always add in there the people that I've said goodbye to personally, honoring my own grief until all of the hearts are back in the bowl.
Wow.
There's something significant when you take this heart and you put it in your hand and you just touch it and you hold it and you just feel gratitude for being present for a moment when others couldn't, knowing that I do a job that some can't do, holding the hearts and grief for others who are struggling. This bowl became my grief support
Wow.
and it worked and it works.
Well, good because I've started my own bowl. I
Good.
beside me here today. I just have a couple of little hearts in there, both for my parents and for my husband, in their memory. And then, of course, there's more, but I just haven't found the hearts yet. So I'm now a heart collector as well.
I
Um,
love that.
and I love the idea of doing this, even if it's once a week for me. Um, just sitting and being present with the grief I feel, no matter who it is I'm thinking about in particular. But yeah, I think this is a very healing ritual for all of us to consider as being part of our life, whether it's, every day, which for some of us it might be, given a recent death potentially, or whether it's once a week or once a month or, once a year, whatever that looks like and works for other people. But I truly love that whole idea. And it makes me feel good in a way about being human and going through grief and knowing that this is a part of life. It's not something weird or something that only happens to a few, but that all of us have grief. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, and that we can honor that.
I during COVID, I was trying to find ways, ritual is sort of my thing. I think it's because of my doula role, but really in general, I've lived a whole life of ritual. But during COVID, because the loved ones couldn't be there, I started another ritual, which is very similar, in which I took a little heart and I bought these red ceramic hearts, little teeny tiny ones. And I would take the heart and I would put it in the hand of the person who was dying. And I would wrap their hand around it so that their hand was holding the heart.
Mhm.
I cut little square fabric pieces from my giant fabric collection, and I would take the heart out of the hand after this person had died, not touching it, but putting it in the fabric square and tying it, and
Mhm.
then giving it to the family, knowing that that was the last thing they held. And this became a ritual for me during COVID, and I've continued it. About maybe a month ago, I went to a store. I was just shopping, regular stuff. And on the counter was this bowl of hearts, glass hearts, just like tons of them in different colors. And I started picking through them and picking a few. And the storekeeper said, "What are you going to do with those?" And I told her my story about my grief bowl and the hearts that I'm giving to people who can't be with their loved ones when they die. She took the thing of the container of all the hearts and she poured them in a bag and she gave them to me. And she said, "Here, this is my contribution to what you are giving to others." I
Oh,
know.
yes.
And we're all grieving something. And to be seen, to be held, to be acknowledged, where there's no right or wrong way to do it unless you're harming yourself, of course. But I think we have to make peace with the fact that we do it differently, but it is something we have in common. We do grieve, albeit differently, and it is our reaction to loss of someone or something that we felt deeply connected to. Not necessarily love, just a connection that made us feel whole. And and I think that if we can all honor that, maybe we'd be a little more supportive for those who are experiencing it, understanding that they're going to do it their way.
And that really is a challenge because we grieve in different ways. People, in my own experiences, sometimes people were like, I don't understand. You don't seem like you're sad. And it was like, oh yeah, I'm sad, but I'm not public with my grief, right?
Am I not crying enough for you?
Exactly. Yeah. And so learning to let people, let them grieve the way they need to grieve is a way to honor people, the dead and the living. If you mentioned earlier in the story you were sharing about your personal experience that you almost felt a little distanced from your mother's death, right? And sometimes that's a mechanism for survival for us. So I think it helped me with my parents that I wasn't there. It would have been even more intense. And believe me, it was intense enough when I lost my father and when my mother passed away. So is there a way that we don't have to distance ourselves from our grief to protect ourselves, but at the same time not completely lose ourselves to the grief we experience in life?
Well, that's a really good question. And I can only speak from my own experience. You know, when you're sitting at the bedside and someone you love, someone you care about, someone that matters to you, even when you don't have a close relationship, when they die, a lot happens. In my case, when both my parents died and when my brother died, we didn't have a close relationship. So, wrapped tightly around my coming up grief was guilt and regret, and that makes the grief harder. My sister, who was probably my favorite human in the whole planet, died 10 years ago, and I wasn't necessarily there at the bedside, but I know she knows how much I love her, and I know how much she loves me, and I was able to take that with me. My grief for my sister is just filled with missing her and wishing we had more time.
Hmm.
My grief from my parents, I'm glad I was there versus not, because we didn't have a good relationship. I feel that it was a sense of closure for me being able to at least say goodbye. given an opportunity to do it again, I would have sat at their bedside. I would have held their hand. I would have said all the things. So I do have regret in that regard. My son's husband died, my son's father died many years ago. We had been divorced, but we had talked about getting back together. And I was excited about it. We had worked through a lot together. We had both been through other marriages. We had kind of done some work on our own selves. And he came around a corner leaving someone's house and he crashed into a tree and he died. My grief for him and for not being able to see that move forward and giving it another chance, there is like this empty hole that I can't fill.
Hmm.
So I can fill the hole with my parents. I can fill the hole with my brother. I can even fill the hole with my sister. But when Tom died, I I feel like someone put a muzzle on me and I wanted to say something. I wanted to talk, but my voice wouldn't come out. And I think that's the real grief that sits with me, the unfinished, the unresolved, the because it didn't make sense.
Hmm.
I think grief grief is a little bit messy and it's not just about the death itself. It's about the life they lived, our relationship to that life, our relationship to them.
Hmm.
When my brother died, I was at his bedside for many days, and I've shared this story a lot because I think it's really important to hear. Every day I apologized. And I said, I'm sorry for the distance. I'm sorry I didn't try harder. The fight started because of him. And I did fight initially, but I just let go. And maybe there was this part of me in my head that said some way, one day down the line, we'll fix this. And that's our biggest problem. We always think, oh, I'll do it next week. I'll do it next month. Maybe I'll send a letter. But I sat at his bedside, not just apologizing for the distance, but also offering him forgiveness and and a sense of well, an apology. I accepted his unsaid apology and I gave him mine. And I just kept saying over and over and over, I'm sorry. And he woke up the day before he died. And he could actually talk. They took him off the ventilator, the oxygen. We thought he was going to live.
Hmm.
And I said, Ben, I was here every day. And he said, I'm sorry too.
Oh my gosh.
So when he did that, that helped me release some of my regret and guilt. But interestingly enough, that moment helped me with Tom dying, my son's father, and my parents, because I didn't necessarily get to say goodbye. But now, because of my experience as a hospice nurse, because of Ben saying that to me, I know they know I was there, whether in person or right here. And that's enough for me. It has to be enough for me. I can't go back and fix it or do it over. I have to make peace with I know they know I was there for my parents. I
Mhm.
know Tom knows that I love him and I always will. I know my sister loves me more than anything. And even with Ben, I know that he is sorry too. And that's enough for me. And with that, I now can hand that over to families who might be conflicted, who might be living in regret and guilt, and let them know that their presence enough is enough sometimes. Just be there. You can't make up for the past. Just be there because I promise you that is what they're going to take with them.
So I heard a whole bunch of lessons from that. And one of them that really resonated with me is assume that you will not have next week or next year. And that if there is something you need to resolve with the people you love, do it right now. Don't
Yes,
wait. And that actually is the foundation for very healthy relationships to begin with, right? So
absolutely.
don't say later because you may not get that opportunity later. And then the second biggest message I got from what you just shared with us, Gabby, is trust the process. Trust that, I always say timing is divine. divinely determined. And so wherever you are, wherever you were when someone passes, it doesn't mean that you let them down because you weren't by their bedside. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't, doesn't matter. Trust the process that the person knew that you love them, and that you will miss them, and that they were an important part of your life. And just trust that. And maybe there's even a little faith, right, involved in that. Very powerful. Um, the other thing I thought about was, I'm just going to share briefly, is I went to a funeral a few years ago, a memorial service for a friend of mine whose husband had passed. And I was really surprised, as we went through the service, people would speak, and it would be like, kids from his childhood who had grown up would speak and say, well, I knew so and so, and we did this and that when we were young, but we lost touch. And then it was like, well, when my son graduated from college and went off to live his life, we saw him every Christmas for a while, and then it was Christmas cards. And I really didn't know him as he was today, but I knew him then. And so we spoke about those times. Work colleagues would say, oh, I know him, I loved him, but we only worked together. I never saw him outside of work. And so what I realized was, oh my gosh, especially my own brother and sisters, they only know me from when we all were a family.
Yeah.
And we have evolved away from each other. We still are in touch, but we have evolved away from each other. And now we see each other once a year. I initiate reunions because I don't want, if I pass away, I want them to know who I am, not who I was 20, 40 years ago, but who I am today. And I want to know who they are today. And that has been a rich, rich lesson for me and brought great blessings into my life. So, because in the end, none of us are getting out of here alive, right? So,
True.
no, one of us is going to go, and I want to make sure I've done everything I could to have a healthy and fulfilling relationship with them. So there isn't that regret or any kind of guilt whatsoever holding anyone back. Um, so with that, if someone were to ask you, and I am, what would you say healthy grief looks like?
I think it starts with honesty
Hmm.
and making peace with the past, good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent. I think for me, I'm at a place now where I didn't have a great relationship with my mom and dad. And yes, I have regret because they have died and I didn't get all these 30 years with them. But I do believe in my heart that if they were alive now, I don't know where our relationship would be, but I do believe that I can feel a sense of gratitude for being here because of them. And I'm trying to make peace with not how it used to be or how I wish it could be, but that it is what it is,
Hmm.
and that I did the best that I could with what I had. And I'd like to believe that they did as well. Healthy grief is taking accountability. It's truly owning your place in things. Could I have done things differently with any of the people that have died in my life? Yes. Could I go back and think, gosh, if I had just said one more thing or told them I love them one more time, would that have changed things? I don't think so. Maybe it reminds us how to do things better in the future, but healthy grief is owning it, honoring it, seeing it for what it absolutely is, and not beating yourself up about it. Trying to find the beauty in the life that you witnessed, in the love that you were gifted, whether it was a short amount of time or a long period of time.
Hmm.
Cherishing those gifts, holding on to that. One of my favorite quotes is, "My memories say hello. They ask about you all the time." And I think if we could go to the place of memory, not the bad memories, that's not healthy,
Hmm.
but the moments. My mom and I didn't have a close relationship, but every time I'm walking down an aisle at like Safeway at the grocery store and there's music playing and I want to dance, I go back to a time when I was a little kid and she would dance down the aisles and I was mortified, right? But I passed that on to my children and my children's children. And
Uh,
now my son Goofy's is goofy in the aisleway, and my granddaughters are mortified. But I look at that and I see, my mom.
uh,
And there are things that my mom and dad were big into music. I'm big into music. My dad was an artist. I think I'm pretty creative. So I don't go to this place of, I wish it was more like this. I wish I said more things. I wish we had more time. I wish I had done it differently. Instead, I go, okay, I've got this tiny little handful of memories, and I'm really grateful for those. And when I'm feeling sad, I try to go to that place.
love it.
Healthy grief is talking about it, sitting with it, honoring your body in the different ways that it takes it all in,
Mm.
and preparing yourself for the myriad of ways that grief shows up at your door. It's not going to be the same. We're not like anybody else. And we have to make peace with that. Maybe it's about making peace with all of it. That doesn't make it easier, it just makes it real.
Hmm. I don't think it's easy. Any part of it is easy, but
No.
I did love the idea of, the memory, going back to memories that were positive memories, not any kind of negative ones, and then taking those memories and turning them into traditions,
Mhm.
or ways that your family behaves. Like, for example, my mother always said, I was born under a lucky star. And I always told my daughters the exact same thing. They were born under a lucky star. And I hope that they tell their children they were born under a lucky star. And it's kind of an expression of just good things happen to us.
I
We don't
love that.
even try. We just stand here and good things are going to happen because we were born under a lucky star. But that's my mother.
And I think that's a beautiful thing. My mom, we didn't have a lot of money. And if my mom got a little extra money for something, she would buy us a treaty. That's what she called it. And it was usually like a carnation breakfast bar, which we all loved. Chocolate chip and peanut butter were my favorite. And she would bring the box home. It was in this yellow box and it said carnation on the front. And oh my gosh, it was like Christmas when she walked in with these. And my little sister would eat her box very slowly, maybe one a day, right? My brother would be like, and then I would plow through them like there was no tomorrow. But her bringing home a treaty was a big thing. Well, my kids know what a treaty is. My
What?
granddaughters know what a treaty is. The other day I said to my friend Lisa, I said, "Hey Lisa," because I'm going to go see her in a couple weeks. I said, "Lisa, I'm bringing you a treaty." And she wrote back, "Treaty?" question mark. Yeah, you silly wabbit. Treaty. You're getting a treaty. I'm bringing you a treaty. It's a gift. It's a present. It's something from me to you. Don't you know what a treaty is? And when I'm texting her all this thing about a treaty, that was my mom. That
Mm,
was my mom started. And I do have gifts from my mom. If I could go back in time and with an I wish I let her know just how much I appreciate the things that she did do for me. And my dad too. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just trying to really find gratitude and peace.
you sound like you found it.
I think so.
Yeah, that's nice. So we've talked about the ritual of the the heart bowl. Are there other rituals that we can embrace to help us deal with grief that you are aware of that you'd recommend?
Yeah. I do so many different rituals. There's a ritual, and I do talk about this one, and I think it can be put towards grief every night. But let me go back. One of the things that I found, especially during COVID, so COVID happened. Then when it kind of loosened up a little, I got kind of a little bit sick. My body wasn't, I was just exhausted and going through all of that. And a relationship ended, 14-year relationship, and my brother died all at the same time. And so I was kind of a little bit messy. And what I found was that I was taking everything from one day to the next. I would go to bed at night feeling all this heaviness, get up the next morning with that heaviness, go through my day, add to my heaviness, go through the next day, and it would just kind of continue to pile up. So I started asking myself three questions before I go to bed. The first question is what I did well today. And if we're just putting it in the context of grief, I got up. I
Hmm.
got out of bed. I ate food. I took a phone call. I accepted some kindness from a neighbor. I walked outside. I lived. What did you do well today? And then I asked the next question, which is, what could I do better? Not different, just better. What could I do better? Well, maybe I could have gotten out of bed a little earlier. Maybe I could have eaten a little healthier. Maybe I could have called the therapist and said, I need some help. Maybe I could have reached out to a friend when she asked me if I needed anything. And instead of saying, I'm fine, say, I'm not fine. Could we go for a walk? What could you have done differently today? And then I ask myself, what did I learn? Well, relative to grief, I'm stronger than I ever thought I could be. I'm I'm still standing. The love hasn't left me. It's not going anywhere. My sadness is real. I'm learning that this is part of life and I'm doing it the very best that I can. And I close the day with that so that the next day I don't have to take it with me anymore. And by doing that, it left everything in the day before, allowing me to start the new day fresh. I do that every night. And and sometimes I even go through the day when something good happens, something that surprises me a little bit, and I think, oh, that's a good thing. And I let that sit with me for a bit. If I do that, I start my next day a little lighter. I think we need some sort of ritual that gets us out of bed so that we could live the life that we are still gifted. We're still here. And I am certain, and you've probably heard this too, people say this all the time, they wouldn't want you to be so sad. They wouldn't want you to be staying in bed and hibernating like this. They wouldn't want you to be taking care of yourself this way. You've got to do better for them. Well, most of us want to say, no, that doesn't work for me. But the truth is, they wouldn't want us to be so sad. And if they were given an opportunity for more time, I think they'd be filled with gratitude. So why can't we? Because we have.
Hmm.
We've been gifted more time, even if it's just today. So
I
if we honor that, maybe we will savor our life with a little more childlike excitement,
and maybe live our life more fully, right?
far more fully.
Or more fully. Yeah. I think since particularly since the loss of my husband, I did go through some heavy grief for a while, but when I look at my life today, I realize, how proud he would be of the life I live. And probably is even like laughing at, why wasn't I as open and as adventurous as I am today back then?
Why didn't I have that version of you?
Exactly. I kind of think you might be wondering that because that's the version you fell in love with, I think. But we kind of
I
got,
love that.
stuck in the old, let's get it all done. We've got to do this, we've got to do that, and buried in the routine, not in the adventure, free flying in the adventure. Do you think that grief changes for us? That process of grief changes as we age? Is it different?
Absolutely. I think that time softens my grief. I don't think it ever goes away. I think each anniversary of the death or the just the reminder of the person, the birthday, the holidays, each anniversary, right, is a mile marker on a track that we are going to be going around for the rest of our lives.
Hmm.
Does it go away? No. Does it get better with time? That saying just drives me crazy. I think what happens is we begin to make a little more peace with it. We know it's there. We almost open the door and say, look, you're going to come in anyway. Come on in, my friend.
Yeah.
You're here. The grief is my forever plus one. I am going to bring grief to every place I go. And I kind of got an open door policy with it now because you're already coming, right? Let's do this together. And it's not as scary. It's not as heart-wrenching, but that doesn't mean I don't have days. I woke up the other day and which is weird because I never would have called my dad for things, but I woke up the other day thinking, oh, I got to tell my dad that, which is so random. That's never been a part of our relationship. But what time has done has it's almost created a new version of the relationship that I had with them then, imagining what it would be like now, thinking that perhaps now, if my dad hadn't died, or my mom hadn't died, or Tom hadn't died, or I could go on, that our relationships would have evolved because I have.
Hmm.
So I believe that that was all we had. If given more time, it probably could have been better, but I'm going to sit with better because that makes it more comfortable for me.
Hmm.
And and so I don't think it goes away. I think it's with us. I just think we have to open the door and say, "Come on in. Let's do this together."
I think too, because we experience more and more of it, we can be more, it's not as scary.
Mhm.
It's not the loss of someone that we love. It's always going to hurt. But it's like with the passing of my husband, at least I had already experienced my parents dying. So I had some groundwork or some point of reference, right, around what this all involved. And I want to think that as I lose others in my life as I get older, that I can be a little bit more compassionate to myself about what I'm going through, and not are you still worried? Are you still thinking about this? My gosh, how many months has it been, or how many years has it been? Let it
Yeah.
go. It's
Why
cumulative.
aren't you over it by now?
Yeah. It accumulates, right? So we have this cumulative grief of all the loss we've experienced. So in that regard, it's different, I think. But if we've learned from those experiences, then I think grief can be different for us. Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm. If you could give I want to just go ahead and move on to the very last question today and wrap things up. But for those that are listening or watching, if is there anything that you could advise them, suggest to them to help them to begin to release the weight of the grief in their life?
Well, don't stop saying their name. You may think it makes others uncomfortable, and it probably does,
Hmm.
but it's not about them. Say their name, tell their story, save a seat at the table for them. Don't hide from your feelings. And I think one of the most important things people need to know is that not everybody's going to be there for you for your grief because some people just don't have the bandwidth. You think that the people closest to you should be the ones that support you. I had a good friend shortly after my brother died, and she said, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" Right? And I said, "Oh, I'm really sick today." And she goes, "Oh, do you have COVID?" Because that's what everybody asks. No, I don't. I think it's just my grief, right? My grief has sort of affected my body. And her response was, "You're still going through that?"
Yeah.
So what I learned was she is not a person I can talk to about my grief, but that doesn't make her a bad friend. That is what I think my biggest realization became for grief was not everybody you're closest to can be there for you in those times. That doesn't make them less caring or less loving. It just means that that's not something they can do. I counted on professional therapy. I see a therapist every 2 weeks, and it's very helpful for me. Most hospices will offer free grief and bereavement support to anyone in their community, whether they use their services or not.
Mhm.
Go and reach out to them. Reach out to your insurance. Most insurances offer at least 5 sessions for free as part of your insurance. Sometimes it's not your personal connections that are going to be your support. Don't let that detour you from getting help. We have to talk about it because what talking about it does is it sort of opens the floodgates. It lets some of that bottled up stuff go free. And when you do that, your
Mhm.
shoulders drop a little bit, your belly feels softer, and you can breathe. We have to talk about it, but it's not always going to be with someone that's close to you.
I love that, and especially because I think there's so much judgment when we consider grief. That people judge those grieving as you're grieving too much, it's too long, it's too intense, it's too something. And then also those grieving are like, why are people not supporting me? Do they not care? and we make judgments around the were they really a good friend after all kind of thing. There will be people in your life who can really support you, and there'll be people who love you, but just don't have, like, as you said, the bandwidth to emotionally help you the way that you need help and get it, find it from in
Find
some
it.
way in your life, find it because it's important to help you process.
Yeah.
Fabulous, fabulous. Grief has a way, I think, of reminding us just how deeply we are loved and how deeply we love as
Yes.
human beings. Um, as Gabby shared today, we can't stop the wave of loss, but we can learn to, I think, create a place or a space in our lives for that to land, to hold it. It might be that bowl. It could be a ritual. I love that nightly ritual that you suggested, a pause that reminds us we're still here, still loving, still living. If something in this conversation today resonated with you, spoke to you, I would invite you to create your own grief bowl, for example, a simple space to honor what you've lost and what still remains. Sometimes just giving shape to our sorrow helps it loosen its hold on us. Um, you can also find out more about Gabby in our show notes. She has a website and has information for you to share, and you can connect with her there. Learn more also about her grief bowl practice, her work in hospice, and grief education. Again, all of that's linked in the show notes today. If you found this episode meaningful, please take a moment to share it with a friend who might need it. Leave a comment for us. Your reflections help other women find these conversations and remind all of us that we're not walking this path alone. So, thanks for joining me today for this episode of Unscripted and Unstoppable. Until next time, my friends, be gentle with yourself and keep living with an open heart.